So I'm very delighted to welcome you all to this Ashby Village event. The Creative Aging Initiative began last year, about 6 months ago, as we were envisioning our 10th anniversary and what were the key components of our village that we really wanted to recognize, to celebrate, and to look at how it was going to continue to build and grow and support all of our experience of growing older. And one of the pieces that felt really essential was our creative expression, how Ashby Village has, how our members and our volunteers have been involved in artistic opportunities and creatively expressing themselves and doing that together in different ways. We've had several events along the way. We had a photography exhibition that was people had submitted images for, and that was judged. We had a creativity group, several different things along the way. And we had a aging in community exhibition. So there have been many different ways, and it felt really valuable for us to pull together and to explore how can we as a community continue to support our creative selves. And so we began meeting and talking about how we were gonna share this and what the forums would be. And the first thing that we envisioned was to have an afternoon gathering where we could come together and have some people, some of our members and volunteers who have been actively engaged in art in these recent years, but also earlier in their lives, and how art and creative expression was building and cultivating their sense of wholeness and fullness and enthusiasm about living. And so we were all planned, we were getting ready for that. It was going to be hosted this afternoon. And when COVID-19 came in and things started shifting and the shelter in place came into effect, we thought, well, maybe we should put it off. We can't get together. And then as we were talking, we had a meeting to check in with one another. We were recognizing that this is the moment actually where there's a lot of opportunity. It's both an opportunity for us to open those parts of ourselves and to go places where we don't normally give ourselves the time and the energy to explore, like, what are we interested in? What is it that we've done in the past that we might want to try again? Where might we want to go? How can we enliven our experience in being in our homes? And so out of that came this webinar, and we decided to make it shorter. So we're going to meet for an hour and a half total. We'll have, after I speak, we'll have 6 of our members and volunteers sharing their personal stories, their personal experiences of artistic expression and how it's informed their lives, and to throw out some ideas for how we might each kind of continue our exploration. And then following, we'll talk at the end about next steps and how we want to support one another in continuing our creative journeys. So with that, I would like to pass it over, and I do want to recognize that this is our first large webinar that Ashby Village is hosting, and so we are going to be integrating both individual speakers and some of their artwork and some video. So there might be some bumps in the road in terms of our technical sharing, but we will continue to it's part of the creative process. So we'll do that. So right now I'm going to introduce our participants who are going to be sharing with you. So can we see that now? Can we see that now, everyone? Do we see a screen?
Yeah, that's working, Andy.
Okay, great. Great. So I'll just share who will be speaking with you today. So Lisa Esherick, Peter Sussman, Nancy Rubin, Pat Sakai, Barbie Jo Stim, and Russ Ellis. There are a few others that were part of our conversations along the way. And I would like to recognize in particular Flo Raskin, who has been with us the whole way, supporting the journey, administering things, and she will be tracking the chat line. So we'll have the presentations, then the group of us will ask each other some questions, have some conversation, and we'll be opening towards the end an opportunity for Q&A. And we'd like to ask you to put your questions in the chat box, and we'll have a chance to respond. So with that, I am going to pass it over to Lisa. And hold on one second while I just get right here. Suyin, can you unmute Lisa? And I'm going to stop this share, and I'm going to go here.
Okay, Lisa, you should be unmuted.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I'm sharing my screen for Lisa. Can we see that? Can you see that?
Hello.
Screen share?
No,
Am I
Andy.
here?
Share screen. Okay, let's see now. Here, let's see.
The green one.
Got it.
There you go.
Okay,
Oh, well, there's a painting. Okay.
great.
That's a painting called Nation, done in 92 or 3 at the time of the Bosnia-Herzegovina conflict. So let me just tell you a bit about myself. As the daughter of 2 architects, pencils and paper were always available, and I loved to draw. Upon my mother's death, I found that she had kept one of my earliest drawings, a small abstract. When my mother asked what it was, I confidently said it was a gonk. And yes, gonks always looked like that. I treasure it because my mother thought to keep it, and also because the shapes I was making are very similar to shapes I make now, almost, well, 79 years later. At the age of 12, I was determined to be an artist like Picasso, the only artist I really knew of them. I went to art school, dropped out, got a degree in psychology, and taught art for more than 30 years, most of it to a diverse population through the older adults department of City College in San Francisco. At 52, I got my MFA, Master of Fine Arts, in painting from San Francisco State. I drew and painted all throughout, turning to stop motion animation about 10 years ago to satisfy my constant desire to draw as well as to tell stories. And there's a painting that shows some stages of the development. Perhaps Andy, you could pick that next one up, which is London Airport and the many stages.
This is one of those moments.
But that might be hard to do.
Well, I can get there. I'm just, I don't know why.
I'll just go on.
Go on, go on.
I start a painting with a location, a locus, a place. And usually I like a place that's crowded with lots of people, kind of like what we don't have now. An airport, gambling casino, a place that brings people together who don't necessarily know one another. The process of painting for me is a little like the process of making an animation. So that's still Nation.
Yeah.
You can see that I'm moving around. That painting is developing. You know, I was thinking all the way through. It's like a story. Nobody's looking at the central person, the Sufi dancer, except I think the blind man knows he's there. Okay, this is the beginning. This is airport. This is the beginning stage of airport. And you'll see it changes. This is the London airport, done in, I think, 2008. And so you'll see stages, you'll see through the stages how people move, how the painting transitions gradually. And this shows also the early sketches of the place, and then I invented the people, and I just pushed people around. Whatever I felt was necessary in the painting. And you'll see. I'll keep going. So the process of painting for me is a little like the process of making an animation, either drawing and erasing and shooting with a camera and repeating the process, or moving some still life objects. So that led me to the idea that I wanted, because I love drawing, I wanted to do an animation. That's pretty much the finished painting. Then I was doing freeways too, which is also a sense of a journey and movement. So here, that's what's taking place. It's as though the buildings are becoming animated as they move aside for the, you know how when you're moving in a car, everything starts to slant backwards slightly? You move through, well, it does for me. And then I think Andy will show the animation that I made, which is called Morandi Moves a Still Life. That one, yeah. So this is one of my early animations done about 2012. And I used the music of Satie. So the process is simply moving something, shooting it with the camera, moving it again just slightly, shooting it with the camera, and on and on and on and on. It's a total of 1 minute and 20 seconds, but many different shots. So that's a bit about my particular creative journey. Now I'd like to open my part of this discussion on creativity with some thoughts. Though creativity is so often thought of as in the province of the arts, music, dance, visual arts, literature, everyone, it could be, yeah. I'd like everyone to consider that creativity is part of all of our lives. It's in science, economics, engineering, governance. We could use a good bit of governance with creativity now. Gardening, cooking, etc. It has to do with the ability to turn things upside down, inside out, look at things through different lenses and from different vantage points. It has a lot to do with trying things out and being willing to make mistakes and risk failure. So I'd like to read you a quote about creativity that Martha Graham wrote to Agnes DeMille. These are two great choreographers. There is a vitality, a life force, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium and be lost. The world will not have it. It is not your business to determine how good it is, nor how valuable it is, nor how it compares with other expressions. It is your business to keep it yours clearly and directly, to keep the channel open. You do not even have to believe in yourself or your work. You have to keep open and aware directly to the urges that motivate you. We are all now challenged to find whatever gives us solace in the face of this extraordinary unknown, with this time, this pause. There is a chance to open doors in ourselves that may yield unexpected and wondrous fruits as we try something new. If you happen to want to be creative with common things you probably have around, You could try drawing. And if you want to draw the beginning of most visual arts, consider that you already know how to draw. You are drawing when you are writing your names. Letters are all just shapes. Our handwriting is unique to each one of us. So make larger writing. Use the whole page, go off the page, then amplify the letters. Play with them. You can also stand up and work from the elbow, the wrist, then the elbow, then the shoulder. That's when you're standing up. And then doodle. It's all mark making, and that is the beginning of drawing and then painting. Here's another easy way to bring out your creativity. Play with scraps of torn paper. Place them on a white sheet. See how negative and positive works. Painting, drawing, and sculpture and architecture, and perhaps we can even say music and dance, depend on negative and positive. Finally, I leave you with a simple suggestion. Now is the time. Play, play, play. Let go of the inner critic. Go to it.
Thank you, Lisa, for that encouragement. All right, I would like to now let's all take a breath, open our arms. Because we're about to open to a whole other world. Lisa, that was wonderful, very rich. Okay, so Peter Sussman will now take the screen and share with us. Do you have it, Peter?
Yes. I want to discuss two aspects of my personal post-retirement creative journey. I'm very aware that others have taken similar journeys, and I believe that the village can help us support each other as we develop new skills. And as I continue, I'm going to show a slideshow of randomly, as soon as Andy enables me to do that.
Okay.
I'm going to show will be a little fumble here.
You should be able to.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Screen share. Okay, let me
There
see.
would have been a fumble anyhow, as I keep talking and working my computer at the same time.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show a randomly displayed slideshow of, let's see if that works. There we go. Is everyone seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a randomly displayed slideshow of some of my photographs. You can imagine them projected on the screen behind me in a real life forum or a real world, physical world forum. First, I want to say a few words on creativity generally. I was a nonfiction author and a newspaper editor professionally, and I was always a passionate consumer of the arts, a museum goer, a poetry reader, a theater lover, but I never considered myself a creative artist. What I came to realize after retirement was that all during my career, increasingly as I gained experience on the job, I had been moving past school-acquired information and techniques and into the realm of creativity. That is, the way I perform my job had been increasingly a creative exercise. I think all of us go through such transitions. Creativity, even when unrecognized, satisfies a need that I didn't know I had. It's a kind of hunger, a biological need that I only recognized more consciously after retirement. For creativity to me is a kind of imaginative engagement and connection, and retirement, disability, and aging are necessarily more isolating and disengaging. My post-retirement appetite for creative expression became more urgent as I became progressively more disabled. I felt constricted, with less physical and social space to move about in, and creativity felt like a way of expanding inwardly to compensate for my new physical limitations. But how to feed that hunger? That leads me to the second part of my creative journey. For a while, since I love poetry and cherish the writing process, I took poetry writing lessons, but I valued poetry enough to realize that my own attempts at the craft were dead on arrival. Meantime, without much forethought, I was drawn into photography. I had never been more than a snapshot photographer with an entry-level point-and-shoot camera that I brought out to record family milestones. But slowly, over time, photography became more of an interest as a craft, then a form of expression, then an artistic passion, and then almost an obsession. It became a way of seeing the world more intensely, engaging with it, and communicating what I saw in a way that writing had once been for me. The change started, I think, with vacations. My travel photographs began to seem a cut above what I'd been capable of previously. I had always cropped news photos during my newspaper career, but I had never stepped back to assess how I was literally telling different stories with different photo crops. I had also laid out news pages without recognizing my compositional skills as they matured. Now I built on that background to think more consciously about how I framed shots in my camera viewfinder and how I edited them later. I delighted in trying to capture my grandchildren in photographs, preserving their exuberant personalities. I began upgrading my cameras to be able to better capture the visual insights I loved preserving. A big leap forward came when I decided I couldn't break through to a higher level unless I taught myself manual controls, f-stops, shutter speed, ISO, and the like, along with the sophisticated software that professional photographers use to draw more expressiveness from their digital captures. You can learn some of those skills through books, classes, and YouTube videos, but it was at this stage that luck gave me a big boost, as it often does if you're open to it. A neighborhood friend who is a professional photographer took an interest in my photos and began giving me pointers, and then lessons. He challenged me to upgrade to a more sophisticated camera and to learn to shoot in the so-called RAW format, which requires specialized software for more ambitious photo editing. The creative engagement of photography has become an important and deeply satisfying part of my aging years. I believe others can find similar meaning through their own artistic journeys. If you are fortunate enough to bump into the kind of coach I have, if you aren't fortunate enough, you can smoke out resources online in adult classes, and I hope soon through Ashby Village interest groups in various art forms, where we can share our experiences with each other, talk techniques, and maybe even exhibit or perform for each other and for the public, as a number of us did a few years ago in the village's highly successful photo exhibit in a local gallery. I can't wait to see what our talented membership comes up with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Great. So take another moment. Yeah, I see the applause, but let's just take another moment to, I want to encourage everyone to close your eyes for a moment and just see all those images and take a breath. And we're going to now transition over to Nancy Rubin. And Nancy, let's hear from you.
After I retired, I wanted something to be passionate about, where I could lose track of time, something that would be fulfilling, fun, calming, but I never saw myself as artistic. So I did a combination of actively looking for this, talking to friends, reading books, taking classes at adult school, and just being open to what might cross my path. And for me, that turned out to be photography. It would be an understatement to say that photography has changed my life. It has, and it's all been in a very positive way. It's opened doors. I met amazing creative people through classes, through Ashby Village, through the Berkeley Camera Club, and being part of a group of 8 women where we get together once a month and support and critique each other's work. It's also been a wonderful way to give back to this community where I've lived since 1963. I donated time to nonprofits with my photography, like the Y and the animal shelter. I see my camera as my best friend. And more recently, it's really just been my iPhone. I often have my other camera with me, but this turns out to be the one that I'm using the most now. And I think most of us have a phone we can use. Pre-pandemic, it would be an excuse to approach people on the street. They would look interesting with something they were wearing. And I would ask if I could take their photo. And I just love these little intimate conversations that would take place. Right now, I'd like to focus on what we can do now, given that we're staying at home. Every day I try to get out for a walk to forest bathe because we know how healing that can be. I go in my neighborhood or to Tilden or in my garden. Spring this year seems to be just incredibly abundant with all the beautiful blossoms that we have. There's so much beauty. And despite so many things being closed, my photography teacher reminds us that nature has not been canceled. This is a photo of a succulent that was taken just a few blocks from my house. If you can't get out, what do you see from your window? Could you make a still life from your kitchen utensils, a bowl of fruit? A friend just posted online a still life that he did in honor of the pandemic, which he used sanitizing wipes, bleach, gel, rubber gloves, mask, and of course, toilet paper. It was quite a lovely composition. I feel strongly that you should share your work, push yourself to create a new image every day. If you're uncomfortable showing your work on social media, why not reach out to a grandchild or a friend who's living alone? I started sharing with my 6-year-old neighbor, and this has challenged me every day. You also might want to document this extraordinary time that we're experiencing. And here's a photo of Tilden where I love to walk near the little farm. And even since then, there's been more signs with caution tape around the picnic tables. So things have drastically changed and it's fun to take photographs of that. Also, if you're walking, you may notice in the windows teddy bears and rainbows, and children are putting these out as part of a bear hunt based on a book called Bear Hunt. Several years ago, a friend from high school sent me a photo of a mailbox, and then I sent one back to her. And after that, I would see the most amazing mailboxes, so creative and colorful, funny. And once you do something like that, you can't unsee it. And from now on, I notice every single mailbox. So maybe on your walk or in your garden, see something and then notice it in other places. The older I get, the bolder I've become. I'm not afraid to be rejected. So I urge you to discover what works for you, what excites you, be okay with making mistakes. Join me in becoming bolder through art.
Again, thank you so much, Nancy. I see applause happening out there. So yes. Okay, and I'd like to pass it over to Pat Sakai, who will share a little bit of her journey.
Hello, everyone. I'm taking you back now in time to when I was 17 years old in high school. And I did something quite unthinkable. I dropped a college prep class to take a semester of art. And that was just not done if you were college prep track in those days. And the college counselor, needless to say, was not very happy with me, but I persisted. So my art teacher gave me a stretch canvas, some oil paints, a palette knife, which I'd never seen before, and a magazine photo of Portofino, Italy. And he let me work at the back of the classroom in my very first independent study. One of our members online right now, Veronica Martin, later did the same thing. So she can attest to how rare it was for somebody in a college prep track to do this. Anyway, My teacher and I would discuss at the end of each class for 5 minutes, mostly him asking me a series of questions and I responding based on what I just discovered without any expectation of anything really, and no fear of judgment. So by the end of the semester, I completed one oil painting, which you now see in this frame, which my parents bought. And I had the most phenomenal learning experience, I have to say, that I'd ever had to that point, or dare say ever since. But I have to admit something. At the time, I really didn't understand the fuss that some of my teachers were making, several of whom offered to buy what I produced. And I was kind of mortified. In fact, like many teachers, like many teenagers, I was pretty embarrassed by any attention by adults. I guess that's common among teenagers. After all, you know, in my mind, I had just copied a photo. So fast forward, I didn't paint again for over 50 years. And why? Life just kind of got in the way. You know, college, career, kids. And I know there are probably many of you out there who can relate to this. About my career, very quickly. I worked as first a teacher, then a training director at several large corporations in the Bay Area. And this type of work required me to use problem-solving, analytical skills mostly, and very detail-oriented linear thinking. And this was satisfying to me at a certain level, but I yearned for a creative outlet. Outside of work, one such outlet for my interest in design and color was that I sewed some of my clothing. And later, when I discovered consignment shopping, I began to buy used clothing if it appealed to me at some level, and then I would alter it to give me some creative opportunity. And I experimented with pattern, with color, with form, with layers, with lines. Fast forward now to 4 years ago, after I'd left the corporate world, and after, as I said, a break of over 50 years of not painting, I finally, what I say, scratched an itch that I had for a number of years. I began studying painting with a small painting group, including Russ Ellis, led by a wise and talented painter. And I realized at that point that most of my life I'd been missing just that kind of creative, exploratory experience that I had as a teenager when I just took a risk and I actually had the time of my life. And speaking of taking risks, I still take inspiration from that first painting of my 17-year-old self, which hung in my family home for over 40 years and now hangs in my home. And it reminds me every day of the importance and joy of taking risks and not worrying necessarily about the outcome. I still consider myself very much a novice, and I have so much more to learn and hopefully many, many more years of painting to improve. You see the kind of painting mastery in Lisa's work that I will never get to, but I enjoy painting for something because it does something for me in a way that nothing else has done. My painting style at present, as you can see, is non-representational, non-linear, not analytical. I try to be spontaneous, allowing my instincts to take over from moment to moment. And I try to focus mostly on the moment and just enjoy the process. This is a huge contrast to what I did for 40 years in my corporate career, where the bottom line, hard results, were really the most important thing. And that made it very hard for me to be difficult. Probably a lot of you experienced that kind of thing in your own career. Just a bit about my process of working, and I'm going to wrap it up. I really don't know exactly where I'm going when I begin a painting, but wherever my hand, my brush, my palette knife takes me, I generally follow. And the painting will tell me when it's done. I try not to analyze. I look, I go away from it, I come back and look, and if something just makes me move, that's when I respond to it. When I paint, and this is really wonderful for me, I do not experience a fear of failure. I can't fail. I see every stroke as an opportunity for a new possibility. And I challenge myself to never consider a mistake as such, because they often lead me to something I never expected. This particular painting that you're looking at right now is one of those that just I had to wrestle with. I mean, it took me a long time. And finally, there was a breakthrough when my teacher said, try some red or brown. And so I did. And that just changed everything. And I want to get back to this idea of creativity and aging, because I sometimes ask myself whether this is all a function of my aging, where another part of my brain takes over from the analytical parts, which I still use sometimes, but which are getting worn out from just too much thinking. That's what I think. Does that resonate with a few of you? Hope so. So some of you involved in creative work of any kind now or in the past must know this feeling that I found. I find myself in some exquisite endorphin-driven zone while I'm painting. There's nothing like it. Peter, Nancy, those of you photographers probably understand what I'm talking about. Writers, quilters, it's unlike anything I've experienced. Often I wonder, where did the time go? And it makes me hungry for much more experience in the creative world. So to just conclude, my hope is that each of you will ask yourself, is there an itch that you've been needing or wanting to scratch? Is it something creative? Maybe you don't think it's something creative, but you have to scratch it. And I think it's in there somewhere. And this is now is a particularly good time to do it. Respond to that urge. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Pat Sakai. I just want to encourage people. This came to me yesterday and I heard it again. If you're wanting to scratch, don't do your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your back. That's a good one. Let's all scratch our back for a second. Scratch our back. Just give a little scratch to get ready for the next presenter, who is Barbie Jo Stin. You there, Barbie?
I'm here, yeah.
Great.
I guess I'm seeing you in the box, so.
I'm getting you too.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm still seeing you there, so.
It's probably your,
Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so I believe I am the sole craftsperson on this panel, and I'm going to take you along on a journey that brought me to my craft. I designed and manufactured women's fashion accessories for almost 30 years. I owe my creativity to my parents. I was lucky to have two parents who were creative thinkers. They weren't afraid to try something new, whether it was an expressive or intellectual pursuit. My father wrote plays and short stories, sketched often, and in the evenings he would develop and print black and white film with me. On Saturday afternoons, it was sitting side by side as we examined the exotic lands that my stamp collection took us to. I helped myself to his tool collection and knew that these gadgets and the use of these tools would provide endless possibilities to repair or create something I might want to make. My mother loved problem solving. Long car rides were always filled with word and guessing games, made up stories where our imagination could take us anywhere. I was also lucky to live near New York City with endless exposure to all the culture that it had to offer. In college, I studied interior design, and my dorm looked out over the sculpture studio where I yearned to be. The summer I graduated from college, I enrolled in a sculpture class and fell in love with the stone as I chiseled away, watching a form appear from the hard surface. A bit later, while living in New York City, I enrolled in a clay class. Clay was my new love. In my mid-20s, I was wanting to leave the hustle and bustle of New York, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. A simple question was posed to me by my mother. What do you most enjoy doing? It was simple. I wanted to work with clay. She said, then do it. I now had permission to do what I most loved doing. When I left the city and landed in San Francisco through a series of fortunate incidents, I was able to pursue my dream. I made pottery and sold it at craft fairs. I taught children's clay classes and designed cups and teapots for a company in San Francisco. And there's my elephant cup. One day, my neighbor came over to show me a new belt she purchased at a KPFA craft fair. It was simple, and the buckle was made out of clay. And I said to her, I can do something better than that. And that was the beginning of my Barbini company in 1983. So I started making leather belts, and they had ceramic buckles. And of course, the ceramic looked like metal because that's really what I wanted to work with, but I didn't know how. So then I continued and made leather and leather and ceramic jewelry. And I had scraps of leather left over and ceramic. And then the recession hit. It was 1980 and the late 80s. And people didn't want to buy ceramic jewelry anymore, so I had to transition to metal. And I knew nothing about metal, but I had a wonderful neighbor across the street from my studio who showed me some simple techniques. But I did something very unconventional, and I glued metal on metal. And so, no, not too many people were doing that, but I came up with a line of people pins, which actually was quite successful for many years and sold throughout the United States. Then I learned how to solder. Well, that's a piece that I did, which was Cold Connection, before I learned how to solder. And then, so I learned how to solder, and I made jewelry with sterling silver, and that has resin in it. And so I had fun with different colors, and that's another piece with resin and sterling silver. So I continued my business until 2010, doing both wholesale and retail. I worked hard earning a living from my craft, but what was the inspiration for my creation? I love dance, movement, and the human form. Also artists such as Noguchi, Brancusi, and Jean Art, Japanese and African art. My works were textural, architectural, sculptural, and they had movement. What kept me going? I needed to earn a living, and I loved what I was doing. I had to believe in myself. I had to come up with new designs twice a year. So it was always challenging, and I said, could I do it? Can I sell it? The thing about design, though, is you know when it's right. It has to feel good. When you create something and it works, there's often an ecstatic feeling, like when you're viewing something in a museum or in nature, and it takes your breath away. It hits you like a spark of lightning, and you feel like you can float away. You feel alive and vibrant. When that happens, you feel like the luckiest person in the world, like you had the opportunity to express yourself. It's an act of gratitude. I no longer make jewelry, but my creativity still flows, and I express it in the way I make and serve food, the way I design and plant my garden, the way I design an envelope that I'm getting ready to send, and the way I design the mask that I now have to wear when I go out. As Dr. Wayne Dyer said, don't die with music still in you. Listen to your intuitive inner voice and find what passion stirs your soul.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I can see myself now.
I see applause, but let's all just kind of take a moment just to close our eyes and breathe in the gratitude and the the sense of the inspiration of what this art can be. Okay, so finally, I'm going to turn it over to Russ Ellis, who will share some of his story and share a song.
Which you will play, right?
Which I will play.
Under the tutelage of my daughter, right? Okay, one of my early ambitions was to be a singer. After I graduated from college, I did have a brief singing career in Los Angeles. I even had a mafia manager for a while. He presented me to Mickey Cohen to get permission to sing in certain Hollywood clubs. But I wanted to be in musicals. In 1961, I did have the chance to sing the lead in Fly Blackbird, a protest musical that included George Takei in the cast. The show went to New York, where it won an Obie, an Off-Broadway award. But it went without me. I went to graduate school and then to an academic life where I lived a life of text. Later in my life, I took up stone carving. After I retired, I took up making bronzes, and then I started painting with Pat, actually. How different that was from a life in text. Recently, my life took another turn. I started writing songs, probably helped by listening to my songwriter wife, Julie Shearer, right here next to me, composing late into the night after I've gone to bed. I invite you to go online to Berkeley Cat Records, all separate words. Click on Russ Ellis. Read the liner notes for the song Eliza. That will tell you how I accidentally opened the door to singing again, but also to effortless songwriting. And now, please listen to one of my songs, We Watch, dedicated to my wife. We watch the birds together. We watch the squirrels at play. We watch the black crow family confront the raucous jay. We have our same old breakfasts and then begin our day. We putter in our gardens and watch the clouds hold sway. The sky is blue, the fields are green, the stream flows to the sea. The more I share my time with you, my time with you is me. Our days, they vary little, and we control our time. Because we are retired, we seldom fall behind. We watch the news on schedule and sports when time permits. And now and then a drama, and then we call it quits. The brook runs clear, the moss sways green, the wind blows strong and true. The more you share your mind with me, the more my mind is you. Our sleep is mainly restful. We get up once a night. We don't wake up so early, so miss saying bye tonight. We watch the birds together. We watch the squirrels at play. We have our same old breakfasts, and
Then began our day. The mountains high, the valleys low, the stream flows to the sea. The more I share my love with you, the more our love is we.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Russ, is that your closing?
That's it. Yeah. Thank you.
So we can all sit with that resonating through us, and I'm going to unmute our presenters. So, would like to begin in sharing any reflections or questions? Pat.
We can't just leave it with that, Russ Ellis. I know that you told us where the inspiration for that song came from, your lovely wife, Julie. Thank you, that's a real gift. And by the way, Russell gifted that to Ashby Village. And it's just, you know, every time I listen to it, it makes me cry. But so here's what I want to ask Russ. Where do your song inspirations come from? Where does that come from?
Well, this will interest everybody, I think. I'm a project-oriented person. I kind of have a task and then I do it. And as I got older and older, I got better and better at that. Then I spent some time, as some of you know, a very responsible administrative post at Cal at UC Berkeley, where you have to take care of business, you know. And so that even heightened my inclination to be organized and actually to delegate and, you know, go grab the Steve Lustigs and say, hey man, could you do this for me? And so forth. Anyway, so, and then the opening into art was very interesting and leaving text was very interesting. I'd always admired people like my wife who are taken over by inspiration, and then they kind of do it because they don't have any choice. It takes them over, and that means she comes to bed at 4 in the morning and with her cell to pay for that, you know. But if you go to this site and read the liner notes, it was just an accident, and it opened me to something I'd never done before, songwriting. And I think it's just a question of age. What flooded in was just the impulse to turn words into songs. The songs wrote themselves. And I was never like that. And I just so adore it. It's such a wonderful feeling to be taken over by the impulse. And I think I just had to live long enough for it to happen. You know, be 85 soon. So, you know, you shouldn't wait that long. But I just think it's just a question of being on the planet, you know, for a long time.
Thank you.
Just as a pause between our conversation, I just want to invite participants to write any questions you have in the chat box. And we'll have this conversation for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll spend the last 10 or 15 minutes just responding to some questions and giving some more response.
May I ask a question?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
To Russ, were you actually playing in that? It was not the recorded version. You were sitting there and playing.
Oh, no.
Oh.
That was a recording. And the guy who was playing is a guy named Jason Martineau. And he's a pianist in San Francisco with whom we work quite a bit.
Oh, yes. I imagined you there playing.
Oh, good. Okay, we'll go with that imagination. Okay. Maybe it'll happen.
Okay.
Andy, I wanted to highlight how much commonality there was among all these individual stories. it struck me as we met in preparation for this and again today that we were all talking about several different common themes. One is the need to do this. I referred to a kind of biological need or a hunger. Pat referred to an itch that just has to be scratched. There's something almost physical about this need if you open yourself to it. I also thought that everyone spoke about a similar kind of feeling of exploration. I loved Nancy's comment that once you start seeing things, you can't unsee them. It just sort of expands yourself. You grow through this process. I loved Barbie Joe's talking about the effect of expanding also to other things. I loved Russ's comment that it's often an accident, but it sort of takes you over. And I think this is true of all of us. I wanted to read a brief challenge poem, as it were, by Lou Welsh, the beat poet, which someone once calligraphed for me, sorry. It's untitled. It says, "Step out onto the planet. Draw a circle 100 feet round. Inside the circle are 300 things nobody understands and maybe nobody's ever seen. How many can you find?" That, I think, is our challenge to grow past Russ talked about the text, to grow past and into other ways of perception and other ways of growing that creativity unleashes. And it often starts with accident or with a challenge like, look around you. Nancy talked about going around her neighborhood. I have a similar thing. A lot of my flower photographs are not because I decided to photograph flowers, but because as I walked around the neighborhood, something just sort of grabbed my eye and I needed to see it from a different perspective. I needed to see its kind of inner dynamic. So I just want to comment on the similarity of comments from people who each came at it from their individual perspectives.
Great, thanks, Peter. I will say, and I'll turn this open as a conversation to our group. We actually wrestled with how much we wanted to specifically state painting, sculpture, craftswork, and as specific forms of artistic expression, and it just being a general posture about how you were engaging with the world, the creative process of just walking into your house and walking into your kitchen and making food, how all those ways that we're just using that spirit of curiosity and creativity to live our lives.
Andy, there's also a question from Laura in the chat. For all the panelists, do you set regular time or a place aside for your crafts?
No. I already did that.
I like that answer.
Is that it? Would all respond to that? All of our presenters?
In a sense, because I was teaching so much and commuting, whatever time was left over was my time to be in the studio. So I got to know hardware stores and grocery stores, but I didn't know anything else. So that's what I did, was taught and painted. Now it's much more loose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think now that I'm retired from my jewelry, everything is just spontaneous. Like I'll walk out into the garden and then I just get lost and then I'm digging up the backyard and, doing something. So yeah, it's all spontaneous now. Yeah.
That's interesting. You mentioned, Barbie, being retired. from jewelry making, and I'm wondering how that transition to retirement, or how these later years have influenced your engagement with your art, whether it's
Well, actually, I realized that I didn't retire when I retired from the jewelry, I then went back to school in my late 50s, and I got my master's in gerontology. So then I did work in the field. So I've been retired from that for the last, I guess, 4 years now. Yeah. And so but even when I was working in the field, I still used some of the skills that from my jewelry, because it's in engaging people, and you just had to be creative in problem solving, how people were gonna work out complicated problems with where they were going with their life. So yeah, so you're always being creative. I mean, once you're creative, you always have it in you to do whatever skill you need to do, wherever. It's just that ability to problem solve. Yeah.
Pat, you were
Yeah, I was going to say that word retired, I've been kind of thinking about that. I have never thought of myself as being retired, and especially since I got involved with painting, and also I'm studying voice. These are two new things for me, and I kind of consider myself re-engaged. And, I am probably more engaged now than I ever was. I was busy. That's different from being really engaged. So that's one thing I want to say. Also, this thing about when do we set aside time? It's a funny thing. I have a lot more time now that I'm stuck mostly in the house, but that's really been a gift. But I just, how I said a painting tells me when it's finished. I'm at a certain point in a painting, and it just keeps calling me whenever I go upstairs to do something else, because my studio is off of the master bedroom. I can't help but wander in there. And if I wander in there and stare at it for long enough, and if I open my palette box, then I'm just gone. So, and there's no particular time that happens. I have a very tolerant husband in Dick, who doesn't apparently mind if I'm painting at 12:30 at night, because the painting is calling to me, and I have to, it could be that I'm only painting for 15 minutes, but I could be at it for an hour. So that's my.
I have very similar feelings to that, Pat. These days, well, in general, I often try a short walk around my neighborhood, to the extent that I'm able to do that, and always the camera is around my neck, and that kind of gives me and I try and look at things from new perspectives, and then that gives me kind of a bank of images that nag at me. And often it will be late afternoon when the sun is right for photography that I do that. And then I get home, and we have dinner, we do things together, Pat and I, and later at night, there's just a almost magnetic attraction to the computer to start editing them, to see what I can see in what I have captured. So there's a first process of capture, and then there's the process of turning it over, of mulching it, and seeing how I can present it in a way that feels authentic, but also accessible.
Great. I have a question from Monica, which she's wondering if someone could speak about the role of creativity in times of stress, such as this unprecedented health crisis, and how it might have has informed your process.
I think it's an antidote. It's a way of stress. With stress, you're pulled in various directions at once, and you can't reconcile them. And with a creative project, you're focused, you're engaged, you've reduced yourself into an individual challenge, and you're just immersed in it, and you haven't even time to be stressed. You haven't mind space for the clutter of stress.
You know, I have a slightly different
Yes.
story to tell. I can tell fairly quickly. Being old and being in the path of the virus, it would appear, I felt some urgency to write things for my children about my life. And I'm not holding myself to any novelistic standards. I'm writing, a paragraph or two or three. And what's really interesting is my past for me has been it was very difficult, my childhood. And it's been invisible. I invisibilized it. I didn't want to go there. I've tried through therapy to get back there. I don't want to go. But now that I'm writing these little pieces about my early life, it's opening up new pieces of my early life. So what I'm having to write to my kids is expanding as I'm working on it. That's really interesting. And I'm sure it's related to the stress of the moment. I'm sure of that.
Great.
I just wanted to say that I cannot paint if I'm not absolutely in the moment. And so much of what stresses out a lot of us in this particular macro moment is what we don't know about the future. And so, I've always been one of these people to maximize my time. It's like trying to do 3 or 4 different things at the same time. When, if I want to get out of that mindset of worrying about what I can't control, then I go and paint. And it is it a stress reliever? I don't know. It's just what I do. And it just demands that I'm right there. That's all.
For me, I realize that time is closing down on me, as with all of us. Not just the coronavirus, but just time. And my energy as a painter for now more than 50 years, I have many ideas and I have to get them out. And so I have to just work at that, whether it's also animation and sort of telling stories or paintings. Both are important.
Great. I want to just open it up to any other questions. The chat box is open. There was a hand, Arlene Reef. Let me see if I can find her to open her up to ask her own question. And if not, let's see. This is the new technology. Arlene.
Here, let me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Arlene.
Am I on?
Yeah.
You're on.
Oh, hi. Yeah. Oh, I can't tell you how just wonderfully inspiring this is. And one thought I had, once we're over this crisis in some way or another, I would love it if Peter and Nancy, you would think about having some kind of a photo shoot workshop for those of us who would really like to explore, experiment, and go out with you on some shoots, and then get back together and share our creativity or beginning creativity together.
Thanks, Arlene. So
my hope is that out of this, we will have several subgroups of people interested in different media, and we then can work in smaller groups like that, either going out on shoots together or editing together or kind of walking each other through our own processes somehow. So I hope that does arise from it. Yes.
So I will just speak as we're inviting any questions or hands up, just to give some orientation about what's next. So we've discussed, as I mentioned, the possibility of starting. There have been a couple small interest groups that have had a couple meetings from our core, the core group that was working, and we're interested in opening those up and talking about, probably within the next month or so, having another webinar like this where we come together you'll get some information about it ahead of time, describing some of the different groups that we're thinking about forming. And we'll have, hopefully by that time, we'll be a little more technically adept, and we'll break out into individual discussion groups for a period of time, and then check back in, so we can start to cultivate these groups of exploration. So, are there
including songwriting.
Including songwriting, right? Are there any other questions or things that anyone would like to share or ask?
Or suggest.
Or suggest, yes. And if not, let's see. There are some people who are on the phone, and I know we can't.
There's one.
Oh, there's a question. There's something. Okay, where? Who? Where?
Sarah?
Schneid.
You got her. Oh, Sarah Schneiderman.
Schneider.
Okay. You got it, Sue-Ann, or?
Yeah,
not?
Sarah, you're unmuted, and then I see Nancy next. So let's have Sarah first.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. This has been so inspirational. I've only been a part of Ashby Village for a little over a year, but I used to do a lot of photography. It was sort of my life for a long time. And now to hear all of you speak, it seems that you're alluding to a spaciousness, this creative vein that you all have in your soul. It seems to be an incredibly spacious place of going beyond some of our more ordinary dimensions, and it's so badly needed at this time. I may not be explaining it quite the way I want to, but I think the main thing I want to say is, Andy, this is just wonderful, and it really, really inspires me. So I hope we do more. I wonder if maybe we could have this kind of a group meeting every month or couple of months, but I'd be very interested in talking further in small groups, because.
Wonderful. So I would invite anyone to send me any ideas, questions, suggestions, and someone will get back to you. Thanks, Sarah. And
I wanted to ask Sarah, is that one of your photographs in the background of the seemingly redwood trees?
Hold on, I just lost Sarah. I just muted her because we were done.
I'm sorry, I thought I was just responding to what I saw in the background in her home.
Yes.
Yes, bristlecone pines.
Is that your photograph?
Yes.
Well, you're there. Yes. Sure, it's beautiful.
Well, I was there many years ago.
You can reclaim it.
I was also going to say in relation to that, you know, we all have this inner critic, and that's part of who we are, you know, the sense of we're not that, etc. But it's so close. It's right here for us, and the only barrier is just not doing it. So if you just kind of go out and you, as Lisa was saying, you know, write your name, write it big, just kind of go and try something. That's the beginning of the creative process. So just encouraging to do that. I saw another hand from Joy Thomas. Joy, are you?
I thought Nancy.
Hang on, I think Nancy's next. And Nancy, you're unmuted, so go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and I am saying, that I'd like to have this again. I'd like to talk about and present my work. But also, I assume that others that have attended this also have work they'd like to share, and I'd like to see it or hear it.
Great. Will
That's
do.
a great idea. That's just a great idea.
Okay, I'm going to unmute Joy Thomas, who had her hand raised. Joy, you there?
I'm here.
Great.
Yes. One of the thoughts that came to mind is I'm very interested in learning more about storytelling. I keep getting questions about my past, and my family wants to know, and my granddaughter's been interviewing me a little bit, but I remember way back in UC Berkeley used to have storytellers from around the world, And I used to go with my children there, and you had the choice, many different choices of who you wanted to listen to. And so there's a knack to it, and a lot to learn there of telling a good story. And I do have the app for the Moth, where there's a lot of storytelling going on. And I just love to hear stories about other people and their past lives and growing up and experiences.
Mhm. Wonderful. Thanks, Joy.
Mhm.
Okay, so are there any other comments, questions? We've got a few minutes and we'll close up.
Well, I want to respond to, is it Schneiderman?
Nancy Schneiderman.
Nancy, her desire to show, to be part of this kind of event. And I imagine another 5 people doing it next time.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Great. All right. Well, I think it's been a rich journey. Are there any closing comments from our presenters? Anything you'd like to leave people with? Or are we feeling full? We will, again, the group that's been working on this will meet again. If you're interested in helping and being a part of it, send me a note. We'll see what's next. We are going to try to keep it smaller just to be a little more nimble in moving forward, but definitely want to know if you're interested in participating and helping to build out our creative expression. So with that, okay, Nancy. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I love Pat's word of re-engagement. And I was also a teacher, and I never liked the word retirement. It sounded like I was being put out to pasture. So because I had summers off, I've always called retirement summer forever, but I like re-engagement even better.
Great. Re-engagement. I would also like to just welcome it in passing, because we're building out our capacity to be virtual. If anyone has any comments or feedback about how this might have been stronger, obviously there's some technology limitations in terms of being able to designate, you know, the speaker as front and center and all that stuff. But any comments would be welcome, and we'll do the best we can to continue to refine our efforts. Keep an eye out for the weekly announcements, where Ashby Village is more and more finding events that we're doing live that are coming from Ashby Village for our members and volunteers. And then we have a lot of links to other activities and events that might be of interest to you. So keep an eye out for that. Comes on Sunday morning. The Daily Dose of Dopamine, which I will credit our dear Su Yin for envisioning and putting forward, and she's gathering. So if you have any ideas, send it to sbickner@ashbyvillage.org. And we're continuing, Ashby Village is continuing to, you know, step forward in as full a way as we can to continue as a strong community, to build connection, to create a sense of bond and linkage for each of you, our members and volunteers, and ideas or thoughts are totally welcome. Our office is open. We are offering continued support for people for essential groceries, medications, technical support, but just give us a call or write us, and we will get back to you from our remote locations. So with that, I want to thank everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Actually, yeah. Yeah, there's this, and then
Very
there's
good.
Okay. Have a wonderful weekend, all. And we'll
All
see
right, you too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.